Welcome to Sleepy Case Files, a place where quiet storytelling meets mysterious cases. Tonight, we slowly explore a story from the world of true crime.
On December 12th, 1910, a wealthy young woman walked down the busy sidewalks of Fifth Avenue in New York City and stepped entirely out of existence. Her name was Dorothy Arnold. For over 100 years, police officers and amateur detectives have obsessed over the physical clues of her famous vanishing. They carefully trace her final steps and endlessly debate the specific men in her private life. The usual story paints her as a helpless victim of a dark, dangerous city. In this common view, she is a tragic figure, swallowed by the menacing shadows of a rapidly growing metropolis. However, this standard perspective completely misses the deeper, much more important truth. Dorothy Arnold was not merely a passive victim of a random street crime. Her disappearance was the ultimate sorrowful result of a society that gave intelligent women only two choices: be a quiet, obedient wife, or be absolutely nothing at all. To understand her case differently, we must look at her vanishing as a desperate clash between a vibrant human wanting to be real in a rigid world that only wanted her to be a pretty, silent statue. The true historical mystery is not how she vanished into thin air without a trace. The real question is how she managed to survive for 25 years in an environment that constantly tried to erase her independent mind. Dorothy lived at 108 East 79th Street, an address representing extreme luxury. She was exactly 25 years old when she disappeared. Her father, Francis Arnold, was a highly successful importer who controlled his family with incredibly strict, unyielding rules. The Arnold family had endless money, but immense wealth. In 1910, was often a golden trap. She lacked nothing in terms of physical comfort, having warm beds and beautiful clothing. Yet she possessed exactly no freedom to make her own choices. New York City in 1910 was a place of massive, noisy progress. Men were busy building giant skyscrapers and enthusiastically embracing the fast future. Dorothy could look out her bedroom window and see the modern world taking shape. Yet, women of her elite class were firmly expected to remain mentally trapped in the past. They wore tight corsets restricting their breathing, heavy skirts making running impossible, and large hats limiting their vision. The physical weight of her daily clothing was a perfect metaphor for the crushing social weight she carried every single day. She was living in a modernizing world that aggressively refused to let her participate. A wealthy daughter was considered family property. Her only real job was to attend polite dinners, maintain a flawless public image, and wait patiently for a rich man to propose. If she stepped outside these narrow lines, she risked destroying the carefully crafted reputation of her entire family. Dorothy was not an empty-headed socialite. She held a prestigious college degree from Bryn Mawr, which was rare and impressive. She was smart, highly creative, and deeply ambitious. During college, she tasted intellectual freedom, reading challenging books, and imagining a life where her voice mattered. But when she returned to 108 East 79th Street, she quickly discovered that a college education was merely a fancy decoration used to attract a better husband. She passionately wanted to be a professional writer. She spent hours working on fiction, eventually submitting a short story to McClure's magazine. Sadly, the editors rejected it. when she asked her father if she could rent a cheap apartment in Greenwich Village to practice writing in peace. He laughed mockingly at her. He strictly forbade it. Francis Arnold told his daughter that a respectable woman stays home until she's officially married. He completely controlled her money, her physical movements, and her future prospects. This critical detail is often ignored in police reports, yet it is the essential key to understanding her mindset. She was a brilliant bird locked tightly in a gilded cage, suffocating under the heavy weight of her father's arrogant expectations. Despite living in a modern city, she had exactly no independence. Let us carefully look at her final day, December the 12th, 1910. The timeline of her movements is surprisingly mundane, making the situation even more chilling. She left her house at roughly 11 in the morning, casually telling her mother she was going to buy a new dress. She carried a muff, a small bit of cash, and wore a tailor-made blue suit. She eventually stopped at Park and Tilford, a popular candy store on Fifth Avenue. She bought half-pounds of chocolates and put the charge directly on the family account. Then she walked to Brentano's bookstore, purchasing a fictional book called An Engaged Girl's Sketches. Outside the store, she met a friend named Gladys King. They talked for a few minutes about an upcoming social event. Gladys later told police that Dorothy seemed perfectly content and completely normal. At roughly 2 in the afternoon, Dorothy waved gently and walked away into the busy, cold crowd. She was never seen again. Most investigators look at this boring timeline and immediately see a random kidnapping. They argue a person buying candy and a light romance book is obviously planning to go home. But consider a different psychological angle. What if these normal actions were a carefully crafted mask? If a human plans to permanently escape, they do not always act erratic. Often they act incredibly ordinary to avoid suspicion. Buying half-pounds of candy guarantees nobody worries until it is too late. The book's title is also highly symbolic. An Engaged Girl's Sketches is about conventional marriage. Perhaps it was a bitter private joke, a final sarcastic comment on the life she refused to live. She purchased the ultimate symbol of her prison moments before breaking out of it. When Dorothy did not come home for dinner, her family did not call the police. This is where the narrative shifts from a simple missing person mystery into a dark portrait of high society pride. If a 25-year-old woman goes missing today, her family screams loudly for help immediately. But Francis Arnold waited 6 entire weeks to tell the authorities. He waited 42 days while his daughter was completely gone. Instead of seeking public help, he hired private Pinkerton detectives. He was utterly terrified of a social scandal. In the unforgiving circles of 1910 high society, a missing daughter meant a ruined reputation. A public search would mean dirty reporters digging into their private business, revealing the flawless Arnold family had a massive defect. The arrogant father decided protecting the family name was much more important than finding his child quickly. By keeping her disappearance a total secret for 42 days, the family gave whoever harmed her or Dorothy herself a massive head start. They intentionally erased her trail before the police even knew she was missing. The family's deep fear of public embarrassment became the exact tool guaranteeing she would never be found. The Arnold family actually preferred the mystery of a missing daughter over the extreme shame of a rebellious individual. During his secret search of her bedroom, Frances found hidden letters from a man named George Griscom Jr. George was a 42-year-old engineer who lived comfortably in Pittsburgh. Dorothy and George had a secret romance. They had even traveled together briefly the previous year, lying to her parents about her true location. To fund this secret trip, Dorothy had pawned $500 worth of her own jewelry. When Francis Arnold found out about George, he was furious. He did not care that his daughter might be in severe physical danger. He only cared that she had shamed his fragile ego by sneaking around with an older man. But let us look closely at George Griscom Jr. He was 42, slightly chubby, and still lived with his parents. He was definitely not a traditional brave romantic hero. When the private detectives finally located George, arresting at a hotel in Italy, he claimed he knew nothing about Dorothy's disappearance. He even gave the angry family the private letter she had written to him. In those letters, Dorothy sounded deeply depressed. She wrote sadly about her writing failures, the magazine rejection, and her father's cruel words. She felt completely trapped. George offered her cheap sympathy, but he did not offer her a real escape. He was far too cowardly to stand up to Francis Arnold. George was arguably a weak, uninspiring man. Perhaps Dorothy did not love him deeply, but saw him merely as her only possible exit door. When she realized that even George could not offer her the free life she truly wanted, her despair became absolute. Because of her secret romance, the most common true crime theory is that George got her pregnant, and she died getting, an illegal medical procedure. In 1910, these secret operations were incredibly dangerous. There was a strong, persistent rumor that a doctor in Pittsburgh operated on her, and she died on the table. The rumor suggested that George and the doctor were forced to hide her body in a basement furnace to cover up the crime. While this grim scenario is physically possible, it is a very standard, unimaginative theory that misses the larger tragedy. Let us look at a profoundly different angle. The real horror is not just that she might have sought a dangerous medical procedure, but that the secret medical procedure was the absolute only choice her society gave her. If she had an unwanted pregnancy, her social life was instantly over. Her father would have thrown her out onto the cold, unforgiving street. She would be a total outcast with no means of financial support. She had exactly no safe options. The rigid morality of 1910 New York created a fatal trap for young women. She was pushed into the dangerous shadows because the bright lights of Fifth Avenue had absolutely no place for a flawed, independent female. Society destroyed her options long before any bad doctor might have destroyed her physical body. The true murderer in this scenario was the unforgiving culture of the Gilded Age. We must also face another dark possibility: intentional suicide. Francis Arnold eventually came to believe his daughter was completely dead. He stated publicly that he felt she had been violently murdered and thrown into the reservoir in Central Park. However, local police dragged the freezing water and found exactly no evidence. What if the hidden truth was a self-inflicted end? Suicide is very often viewed as a sudden chaotic break from mental reality. But for Dorothy, it might have been a calm, intensely logical decision based purely on her bad circumstances. Her writing was coldly rejected by publishers. Her father laughed openly at her dreams of independence. Her secret boyfriend was miles away and offered no real salvation. She was facing a long lifetime of wearing tight corsets, attending polite dinners, and obeying strict orders from arrogant men. If she walked to a secluded spot or took a ferry out into the deep, churning waters of New York Harbor and slipped quietly beneath the dark waves, it was a sorrowful form of political protest. The cold water would wash away the heavy family expectations. It would permanently silence the father, who never truly listened to her anyway. The fact that she left no written notes is incredibly telling. A suicide note explains things to the people left behind. A note asks for forgiveness or understanding. By leaving no final words, Dorothy aggressively refused to give her terrible family the comfort of an explanation. Her deep silence was a sharp, effective weapon. She left them with a permanent question mark, punishing them forever with the terrifying unknown. Conversely, the runaway theory presents her as a brilliant phantom. In the early 20th century, a woman could not easily open a bank account or sign a lease without a male sponsor. For a wealthy socialite with no practical survival skills, vanishing required incredible intelligence. She left behind warm beds and guaranteed physical comfort, trading rich luxury for total uncertainty. If she did this, her disappearance was a massive, brilliant victory. It was the ultimate rejection of the patriarchal system. By erasing Dorothy Arnold, she destroyed the valuable property of Frances Arnold. She took back the first and only thing she truly owned, her physical body and her sharp mind. She became a permanent ghost to her family, but perhaps for the first time in her 25 years, she became a real living person to herself. Today, true crime stories rely heavily on digital footprints. We are very used to having fast, solid answers. This modern expectation makes the Dorothy Arnold case incredibly frustrating for contemporary minds. We badly want to solve the puzzle, but maybe the intense desire to solve the case is the completely wrong approach. By focusing purely on the physical mechanics of her disappearance, we ignore the crucial reasons behind it. Leaving the old case unsolved is, in a strange, beautiful way, the ultimate form of respect we can offer her today. The blank space at the very end of her biography is the only thing that truly belongs to her alone. It is a wide open space that no parent, no cowardly boyfriend, and no arrogant police detective can ever take away. The empty void is her final masterpiece. It is the greatest story she ever wrote. In the end, the strange disappearance of Dorothy Arnold is much more than a historical cold case from 1910. It is a harsh, bright spotlight shining directly on the suffocating realities of the Gilded Age. Whether she was violently murdered in a dark room, drowned in a cold river, or successfully slipped away into a brilliant new identity, the root cause remains exactly the same. Dorothy boldly walked down Fifth Avenue on a cold December afternoon and made a final, permanent choice. Her ultimate legacy is the profound, echoing silence she left behind. She dramatically proved that sometimes the absolute only way for a captive bird to truly fly is to vanish completely into the wide sky, never to return.